India's growing and fundamentally strong macros. We now know, and in fact, this has been restated again and again by the government, this time by Commerce Minister as well, Piyush Goyal, coming out saying that trade deficit is in fact narrowing and exports are likely to grow in months and years to come. And we've been talking about a narrowing trade deficit here on Newsline, but that's also on the account of the fact that even as exports are and exports largely driven by demand in markets all around the world has been low, the imports have been also low, which has resulted in net a gap between the exports import narrowing and trade deficit narrowing henceforth. But he's also now hinting at perhaps exports growing in months to come.
So that is what is quite interesting, Shweta, that, it's great to make lofty statements and it's great to have, expectations of the export story picking up. But is there data to support that? Because Minister Piyush Goyal at Jaipur, which is the hub of gems and jewelry per se, had said, and he's right technically, that the trade deficit is narrowing. But like you said, the trade deficit is narrowing not on account of India importing less and exporting more, but on account of India importing less
and also exporting
also less. It's just that the quantum of or the degree of percentage of how much lesser we are exporting is a little higher than the degree of reduction in import. So as a result of that, the deficit is narrowing, right? Your deficit has narrowed from, let's say, 24 billion in the month to about 20 billion or so. But that is not on account of a great robust export story which is narrowing it. It's overall the volume of trade is coming down. So, you could be bullish and you could take a stand saying that, hey, all the global partnerships that we are inking and all the large marquee events at a global stature that we as the nation are leading or representing. Remember, I mean, India is, of course, the president of G20. And you have the B20 starting today in Delhi, which is the Business 20. And that is going to see a flurry of corporate leaders and government voices. In fact, even Prime Minister Narendra Modi is due to visit the B20 summit on this Sunday, coming Sunday. So the point is that, your whole journey of growth of GDP cannot rest only on infrastructure spending by the government. There has to be all the components that go into GDP growth. If you look at them, there has to be consumer demand. So a solid pickup in consumer demand, capital investments by private enterprises, and a narrowing of trade deficit while increasing that whole X minus M balloon, which means your exports need to grow at the cost of reduction in imports. You need to be a self-reliant economy. You don't see much of that actually happening in the economy right now. So a great story around narrowing trade deficit. The numbers don't support real economic growth. And in an overall environment which is stressed, which is pressurized right now, with discretionary spending taking a beating, exports of gems and jewelry, for example, an industry that the minister had spoken about specifically. Gems and jewelry, one of the largest markets that India exports to happens to be the US. Now, within US right now, you have a massive inflation, you have rate hike, liquidity is being sucked out of the markets, and as a result of which, gems and jewelry obviously is as discretionary as it gets when it comes to consumer demand. So demand for gems and jewelry is low. Now, are there any indicators right now that suggest that this demand is going to pick up in the near future? I doubt it. So, if we can pull up the quote of Minister Piyush Goyal also and show that to our viewers, to our audiences, I think it's important to note that, it's a statement that comes without data. He's saying all in all, trade continues to be robust. Our trade deficit is falling rapidly, and India will continue to benefit significantly from our global outreach. But where is the data to support that? Great to be part of G20, presiding over G20. Great to be, at BRICS and trying to expand that entire trade bloc and that entire, cooperative bucket beyond the 5 existing countries and adding another 6 countries to it. But India has to ensure that its exports grow. And these exports, incidentally, I'm talking about manufacturing. I'm not specifically talking about services. In services, our PMI has been much higher than manufacturing. We have seen exports grow year on year when it comes to services. And on manufacturing, which is your merchandise exports, we've actually seen export contraction for 6 consecutive months. and at the same time we've also seen import contraction for 8 consecutive months. So there has been overall fairly tempered down, slowed down trade between India and the rest of the world.
So while we can control a lot of imports, exports is not something we can really control. There is a problem there with
you
what's
can control
happening
it.
with
You've
global
got to make
economy.
manufacturing competitive.
Yes,
you've
but
got to be able
there
to
has to be
offer
more
quality
demand.
and prices. Of course.
There has to be more demand, which is not what Indian government can control at this point in time. Which is what I think it's interesting to point out. In that same statement, Piyush Goyal also pointed at growing inflation, less likelihood of a higher demand in major economies, including developing economies, at the same time saying that he is bullish on exports. I'm not sure where the data comes from.
Absolutely.
Overall. All right, so that of course is the big story that we continue to track by the way of government's increase, or rather an impetus on narrowing trade deficit at the cost of course imports falling, but exports also declining massively.